Hey everyone, welcome back to the FU Cancer podcast. Today's guest embodies resilience in every sense of the word. Dr. Shaunna Burke is an associate professor at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom, where her research focuses on physical activity in cancer, including prehabilitation, quality of life, motivation, and psychological resilience. She's published more than 30 peer-reviewed articles and has dedicated her career to helping people build strength, both physically and mentally, before, during, and after cancer treatment. But her work doesn't stop in academia. She's also an accomplished mountaineer and elite athlete, becoming the second Canadian woman to summit Mount Everest, completing climbs on 6 continents and pushing the limits of human endurance. Her journey to the top of Mount Everest was documented on the Discovery Channel, and she will be featured there again later this year, documenting her return to Mount Everest in a new independent film entitled Dying to Climb. And if that wasn't intense enough, in 2024, Shaunna was diagnosed with incurable breast cancer. But rather than stepping back, she leaned in, running the Everest Marathon, climbing La Bouche East, raising funds for cancer charities, and continuing to inspire others through science, storytelling, and lived experience. Today's episode is all about movement, mindset, resilience, and what it truly means to keep climbing, even when the path gets steeper. Stay tuned, because this is going to be an episode you don't want to miss. Thanks for listening to the FU Cancer Podcast. My name is Christina Rollins. I'm a dietitian, mom, and wife to a pretty awesome cancer survivor. We said FU to cancer nearly 25 years ago and are still going strong. I'm excited to share the FU Cancer movement, where we are a community of survivors, fighters, caregivers, and advocates, connecting our shared experiences, passion, and determination to live a holistic and well-balanced life. Stay tuned, because we've got a lot to talk about. Well, Shaunna, welcome to the FU Cancer Podcast. I'm so very grateful that you're taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today about your experience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's just a real pleasure to be here today and to have this opportunity to speak with you. So thank you.
So your story spans science, sports, and survivorship. So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and how these different worlds came together in your life, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose really it's sport that actually shaped me into the person I am today before anything else did. Really, I see it as the sport being the foundation everything else was built on. So I actually, when I was young, I was an alpine ski racer. And very much alpine ski racing was a part of my life where I represented Canada internationally. And when my skiing career finished, I then got into mountaineering, and I've climbed some of the biggest mountains around the world, including Everest. And very much it's sport that has taught me how to be comfortable with risk, discomfort, as well as uncertainty. And it's the training that I did through sport that very much taught me about discipline, about resilience, and importantly, how to show up consistently, even when you're not seeing that progress being made. But I suppose ultimately, it's sport that's taught me about the importance of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I talk about mindset, what I've learned when I reflect back on mindset is I've learned through sport that it's mindset that separates the gold from the silver medal at the Olympics. And in cancer, it's what separates somebody who's surviving versus somebody who's thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it's my curiosity in how the mind works that then pulled me towards science. And so I've actually done a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in sports psychology, and then I went on to do a PhD also in sports psychology, which has then led me into the opportunity where I had the chance to climb with a group of breast cancer survivors on Mount Kilimanjaro to conduct a study. And that led me into a 17-year research career conducting studies with cancer patients, which then led to my own diagnosis in 2024.
So how did your own breast cancer diagnosis change how you saw your work? Because you were already so ingrained into this community. How did it change your perspective?
Yeah, I think very much for me before my diagnosis, I really saw my work being grounded in evidence, grounded in data, grounded in outcomes, in underlying mechanisms. So I really understood the link between exercise and cancer from the outside.
Mhm.
And when I got my diagnosis, so I experienced multiple treatments, so chemotherapy, radiotherapy, multiple surgeries, ablation therapy. And I think having gone through all those treatments, very much it taught me, or it's changed my perspective of how I see my research. So I then became an insider. And so for me, my research questions that I'm trying to answer through the work that I do very much became lived experience, giving me quite a unique insight into science. And I think very much for me, it's done two things. It's really given me empathy for the participants in my studies. I think I had empathy beforehand, but I think having had a diagnosis and going through treatment, it's really given me a much deeper and richer understanding of what cancer patients live through. And it's also very much given me a sense of purpose to my research, as well as urgency. I think there's a real need to get the data that we collect out into the real world. How do we ensure that the data that we're conducting has an impact and just doesn't sit on the shelves in a library, for a lack of a better analogy?
Mhm. Well, I can tell already from your stories and again from your lived experiences that you've shared that you're a very motivated person. But we know that motivation in general can be incredibly hard when you're going through a cancer experience, especially when you're experiencing things like fatigue, fear of the unknown, or side effects from your treatments. So, what does the research tell us about helping people get started and then keep going along their journey?
Yeah, so that adoption of a exercise program and then sustaining that over time can be extremely challenging. And the research does show that if an individual is able to tie what it is that they're doing to personal, meaningful reasons, it really does help them to sustain their engagement in exercise over time. So
Mhm.
when we talk about purpose, it's about how you shift or reframe in your mind the question from, do I have the energy to do this? To why does this matter to me right now? And it's a really subtle shift, but it's absolutely crucial because when we live our lives with purpose, very much it helps us restore and give ourselves a sense of control over our lives. We hear a lot of cancer patients say that that loss of control occurs when they get their diagnosis and they go through treatment. But purpose helps restore that. It also helps give meaning to pain and discomfort. And we do know a lot of cancer patients do experience continuous discomfort when undergoing treatments such as chemotherapy. And purpose doesn't take that away. It doesn't take the discomfort away, but it helps patients get through that discomfort and it helps them live with it. And it also fuels resilience. So I think very much when we talk about exercise, we talk about movement. It doesn't have to be something that's big or heroic. When we talk about it, it's just the importance of being able to move more and being able to do the things we enjoy, to be able to sustain that motivation over time. And there's a few tips when we look at the research in terms of what can be shared with patients to help them. And really, it's about starting small. It's about saying, okay, I'm going to take that first step, whatever that might be, depending on what your starting point is. But start with very small goals and slowly, gradually build up to something bigger. Make sure you plan for bad days. We all know that when undergoing treatment, there are going to be days that are more difficult than others, and that's okay. And really, it's about focusing on how exercise or movement feels to you. So trying to find that enjoyment and trying to do something that is of your preference and that you enjoy doing.
Mhm. Well, and I think what you're sharing is a really good message to healthcare providers that telling a patient to do it because I said so is just not enough, right? Like I may do a task or go to the gym once or twice because my doctor told me to, but that's not going to last. It has to come from inside and I have to find my own personal purpose, I think.
Yeah, that intrinsic motivation is
Mhm.
so powerful.
Mhm. So you've climbed some of the world's most challenging mountains. So looking back, what parallels do you see between mountaineering and navigating a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, I think there are more commonalities than people might think. And I think when we think about mountaineering, and I'm going to use climbing Everest as the example, if we were to compare that with a cancer diagnosis, what we see within both scenarios is that you experience very little control.
Mhm.
So if we take, for example, in the mountains, weather can change at any point in time. A storm can set in. If we think about the cancer diagnosis, we know for some people your body changes. And so having a lack or little control is something that you have to contend with both in the mountains, but it's also something you contend with when undergoing a cancer diagnosis. And I think what's really important with both, in both cases, is that importance of focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't. Making sure that you channel your energies into those aspects of your life that you do have control over. Otherwise, it becomes draining on you energy wise if you're focusing on things you can't control. I think as well, what we see in the mountains and with cancer as well is having to deal with a lot of uncertainty. So if we take the mountains, for example, there's a lot of uncertainty around, when your summit day might be. That can shift, that can change depending on the weather. There's uncertainty around the terrain that you're climbing on, where you don't know where the next crevasse, hidden crevasse might be that you might step into. There's uncertainty around avalanches. And I think with a cancer diagnosis, we also know that patients have to navigate that uncertainty. For some patients, it's about the uncertainty around whether they might have a reoccurrence, uncertainty around what the future holds for them. And so I think very much grounding yourself in the present moment is something that is a technique that is very, very useful both in the mountains and in the cancer journey. We can't change what's happened to us in the past, and we don't know what's going to happen to us in the future, but we can actually hold on and ground ourselves within the present moment, within the here and now. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of parallels. The other 2 points I'd like to raise is I think preparation is something that is fundamental both to mountaineering. So before going into something as challenging where you're risking your life in the mountains, that rigorous preparation to ensure that you are ready as you possibly can be, both physically and also psychologically, just helps with being successful on the mountain. And I think the same thing goes with cancer. So my expertise with research is around the area of prehabilitation. How do we prepare patients physically, psychologically, to be ready as they possibly can be before they face whether that be major surgery, whether that be chemotherapy, radiotherapy, whatever treatment they're about to endure. And the research shows that the more prepared you are, it means that the quicker you will recover, the quicker you'll bounce back to your levels, pre-diagnosis levels. So that preparation becomes key. And then the final point I just wanted to make was around both mountaineering and cancer. It's not a solo endeavor. When you
Mhm.
climb in the mountains, you have support of a team around you, your Sherpas, the porters, your expedition leader, your teammates, and it's those people around you that help get you to where you need to be. And with cancer as well, it's your support network and those individuals that you can lean on become absolutely fundamental. And again, go back to that point about the difference between surviving and thriving.
Mhm. Well, after you were diagnosed with incurable breast cancer, you chose to run the Everest Marathon and climb La Bouche East. So, what went into that decision, both mentally and physically?
Yeah, I think for me, when I received my diagnosis, as I would imagine a lot of cancer patients would say, it's a shock. And there's a lot to get your head around. Short-term plans had to be put on hold. Long-term plans that stretched out way into the future became very uncertain. And it was 2 months before I was scheduled to run the Everest Marathon when I received my diagnosis. So I then made the decision, rather than canceling my entry, that I would defer it to the following year.
Mhm.
And for me, that was really important because throughout my cancer treatment, I wanted to have a meaningful goal. I wanted to have something that would help carry me through the hard times. And having that goal for me of running the Everest Marathon was something that helped me stay fundamentally anchored to who I was as a person. It helped me hold on to my athletic identity rather than me just sort of focusing on what was happening to me. It enabled me to still be myself while I was undergoing treatment and experiencing something that was very foreign to me. So I suppose for me, very much the marathon was my way of choosing engagement with life. I wanted to be able to prove to myself that I could still have goals and dreams and I could still go after them. So for me, it became a very important way of keeping myself very motivated.
I'm just curious. Tell us about the moment when you got to the Everest Marathon, when you hit that point. I can only imagine what was going through your mind at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Everest Marathon starts at about approximately 5,300 meters. So it starts at base camp. And it was quite a journey getting to that point. So it actually takes around 10 days of trekking through the Khumbu region in order to get yourself onto the start line. So if you can
10 days till
imagine,
you start. Oh my gosh.
yeah, your
Can't
body
even
has
imagine.
Yeah, it's an unusual marathon in that way because it's more than just a marathon. It's your
Mhm.
body is actually has to acclimatize to the lack of oxygen in the air. And every day you're trekking toward the start line, your body's actually breaking down because the altitude is quite taxing on the body. But I do remember when I got to the start line, I was elated, having reflected on, a year of very difficult back-to-back treatments. For me, being in the mountains and going back to the mountains, to a place that's very, very special to me, meant the world to me. And so I was just over the moon, and it took me 7 hours and 41 minutes to run the marathon. And I ended up finishing fourth in my category of international woman. So I was really, really pleased, and it was fuel for the soul just being back in the mountains for me.
I mean, that is an amazing story. So thank you for sharing that. That is so incredible. So how do you personally define resilience? And then how's that definition evolved through your own cancer journey?
Yeah, resilience is an interesting construct because I think for me, very much my perception of it has changed fundamentally. Before my diagnosis, I saw resilience as something that meant enduring, pushing through discomfort. And I think that served me very, very well in the mountains. Very much resilience is a key component in mountaineering because there's so much discomfort associated when you're in high altitude. As the body is sort of breaking down because of the lack of oxygen, it's very common for people to experience side effects of high altitude. So, difficulty sleeping, difficulty breathing, headache, shortness of breath. So, putting up with that discomfort and enduring it, resilience is what helps you sort of embrace that discomfort, and helps you to continue sort of pushing and forging forward despite that hardship that you're facing. But I actually learned through my diagnosis that resilience really is not about pushing through at all costs. My understanding now of resilience in the context of cancer it's very much about adaptability.
Mhm.
How do we adapt to situations that are constantly changing. When living with stage 4 breast cancer, you don't know from scan to scan what you might be facing, and having to adapt to those forever changing situations becomes crucial. I think resilience is also about self-compassion, and how do we be more compassionate and patient with ourselves? And also, it's also about pacing. I think when we talk about, during cancer treatments and thinking about our energy reserves, it's very much about how do we pace ourselves to ensure that we can still live full, meaningful lives, in so that our energy is channeled in the direction that helps us thrive rather than just survive. And so I think for me, resilience is my understanding of it is massively changed.
Well, I think in addition to keep moving forward with your treatment plans and your goals, et cetera, I think many patients also feel pressure to quote unquote stay positive. So from a psychological standpoint, what's actually helpful and what isn't when it comes to mindset and coping?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I think one point that I want to make is adaptive coping is not the same as staying positive. When you look at what's helpful and what isn't helpful when thinking about mindset around positivity, we know that what isn't helpful is that forced positivity. It's not helpful to tell ourselves, well, I should be feeling more grateful or I should be feeling more positive. That's not going to help us. I think, as well, when thinking about that positivity, what also isn't helpful is that invalidation of emotions. So what do I mean by that? It's really not helpful to just brush aside our emotions. It's important that we recognize our emotions, we name our emotions, we accept those emotions, and we express them. So that's really, when we talk about positivity, it's linked to emotional honesty and being honest with our feelings. I think that's absolutely crucial, as well as having psychological flexibility. So, still allowing ourselves to experience difficult emotions, but at the same time, choosing actions that are based on your values. So, if you think we go back to mountaineering and we use that as an example, you might think of a climber who might acknowledge that they're experiencing fear. But despite that fear, they're still going to continue taking that step forward. They're not going to allow that fear to paralyze them and to stop them from moving forward. So really having that flexibility is really crucial. I think too, what's linked with positivity is going back to this idea of self-compassion. We need to treat ourselves like we would treat our friends, and treat ourselves with kindness, not with judgment. I think that's absolutely crucial. And allow ourselves to have bad days. We all have bad days, and that's okay.
Someone listening is overwhelmed and they're struggling to not climb Mount Everest, but just take a step, just to move at all. What's one small realistic thing that you would encourage them to do?
Yeah, I think if somebody's struggling, I think it's really about starting to make things 5% better. It's about taking a small, realistic step. And I think it's reframing. When we're having a bad day or we're struggling, don't try to see it as I need to fix my life. Try to see it as I'm trying to choose the next right action. So, it might be as simple as getting yourself out of bed and opening the curtains in the morning. Or it might be as simple as just stopping and taking 3 deep breaths. But it's just thinking about that small step that you're going to take. That's a proactive step that's just going to help you get back on that pathway toward being able to keep moving forward.
Well, as you prepare to return to Everest in 2026, what message do you hope that people, especially those living with cancer, take from your story?
Yeah, I think very much for me, my hope is that people facing cancer see that their story in particular, it doesn't end with a diagnosis, that their story can actually deepen.
Mhm.
And you don't have to climb a mountain to live bravely. I think for me, it's very much about you just have to choose to live fully, and that's being right where you are in that moment, wherever that might be.
Well, Shaunna, thank you so much for taking time to share your science, your strength, and your story with us today. I think your journey is a powerful reminder that even when the cancer changes the terrain or the trajectory, it doesn't end your climb. So you just keep moving. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure speaking with you.
And listeners, I hope you found today's episode helpful as you travel along your own cancer journey. If you'd like to learn more about Shaunna's incredible story, visit dyingtoclimb.com. And of course, we invite you to check out our new digital health tool designed by cancer care experts. It's available now at fucancer.health. Until next time, I'm Christina Rollins. Thanks so much for listening.